A Japanese man has just finished a game that took him 3 years to complete, but that is far from what he truly wanted. According to him, the game is far too weak. He wishes he could find one that would last 10 years. Searching for that, he comes across an online game that claims to never end, an endless adventure filled with magic and fantasy. Looking at the available difficulty options, he notices one called Hell Mode, whose description reads, "Regret is the least of your worries, for what you are about to face is the true meaning of despair." Intrigued by the dramatic line, the player chooses that difficulty and then faces the class selection screen. Among the usual classes, such as Swordsman, he is fascinated by Demon Lord, but becomes curious about how difficult the Conjurer seems to be, since it automatically places the player in the social class of Servant and is still in a testing phase. Motivated by a worthy challenge, the moment he clicks to start the game, the Japanese man is pulled into the screen. Sometime later, he wakes up with a younger voice around him, in an environment similar to a womb. In fact, after pushing his way out, he is born again into a place with a medieval atmosphere. After his father picks up the baby, sees that he is a boy, he decides his name will be Alan. Next, we see information explaining that the difficulty Alan chose requires 100 times more XP to level up compared to normal difficulty, but has no level limit. By overcoming despair, we will come to understand the beginning of this world. As time goes by, Alan grows up in a humble home filled with love and attention from his parents. He used to be a 35-year-old Japanese man broke, without a degree, and bad with women named Kanishi Yamada. Now, even though he is a 1-year-old baby and cannot speak, he is able to easily understand the words he hears, mainly because, by luck, Japanese seems to be the main language in this place. Alan was born into a family of servants, just as he selected at the beginning, in a border village where peasants pay taxes to a lord in order to farm the land. His father's name is Rodden. Alan believes Rodden is around 20 years old and sees him as a typical family man who works hard to support his child. His mother's name is Teresha, a very beautiful and kind woman who appears to be in her late teens. That night, after yawning in front of his parents, Alan is put to bed, but instead of sleeping, he raises his hands and mentally commands "status window," imagining it would work like in any isekai. Frustrated that nothing appears, he understands that being spoiled and all is nice, but it is already time for him to start being a conjurer, since he has been trying for a year without success. Then, after some effort, that same night he manages to make a magic book appear in front of him, which makes him scream and immediately alerts his parents. They run to see what happened, but before they can see the book, Alan makes it disappear right as they arrive. Since he pretends to be asleep, his parents believe he was only dreaming or something like that. When the adults leave, the child brings the book back and, upon opening it, finally confirms that he really belongs to the conjurer class. Because of his lack of experience, he is still limited to summoning only a few insects and beasts. Other than that, he notices a message in the book from someone named Elmia, the god of creation. In this message, Elmia says it took some time to finish developing the class properly, and now that it has been chosen by players, none of them will be allowed to switch. Alan interprets this as the reason why his book took so long to arrive. Setting that aside, he notices there are no tutorials explaining how to play the game, meaning he will have to figure out everything on his own. To test his abilities, the first thing Alan tries is creating an insect, and when he does, a card with an insect of rank H appears in front of him. But upon hearing his mother approaching, he pretends to sleep again. Because he is only 1 year old, he ends up falling asleep for real, unable to control his tiredness. The next day, his normal peasant life continues as always. However, whenever he is alone, Alan now has something new to do, because he can finally develop his techniques as a true conjurer. After creating the card, he summons the insect inside it, a somewhat dumb grasshopper that doesn't understand commands and acts like a regular bug. Checking the book to understand how it works, Alan sees that he must give the creature a name, so he starts calling it Denka. As a pleasant surprise, he notices that Denka gives him a status buff of +1 in endurance and agility. He becomes so happy that he shouts, once again drawing his mother's attention, who understands his strange reactions less and less each day. She even sees Denka jumping near her foot and, startled, ends up stepping on him and killing him at least until he is summoned again. As the days pass and Alan keeps practicing, he eventually learns to summon rank H beasts as well. In this case, a little mouse that is also dumb just like Denka, according to Alan. Even so, it gives him a +1 buff to HP and agility, along with a skill called Dash. At least the little creature uses this ability whenever Alan commands it, which is already progressed. Denka, for his part, has the skill Leap. As he develops these abilities, Alan reflects on how this world must be filled with huge, powerful creatures' enemies he certainly won't be able to defeat with the dynamic duo he can summon today. The boy also discovers that he's able to store up to 10 conjuration cards for each creature, and that the most important among them are the buffs. For example, by storing 10 rat cards, his attack increases by 10 points, which certainly explains why Alan showed his parents a strength far greater than what a simple baby should display. In any case, knowing that the experience needed to level up in Hell mode is 100 times higher than normal, the boy has been struggling quite a bit just to advance a few steps. Suddenly, in the middle of the morning, Rodden arrives home covered in blood and holding a spear, but reassures his wife by explaining that he wasn't hurt, it was just the result of hunting a boar a short while ago. Alan shows interest in seeing the boar, so his father puts him on his shoulder to take him for a little walk. Thus, this was the first time Alan was being taken outside the house. Looking around, he was impressed by the beauty and tranquility of that late afternoon. Along the way, Rodden points to a flock of monsters called Albahiron, which always gather and migrate north at this time of year, indicating the arrival of autumn. Speaking of which, Rodden says he named Alan after the Albahiron, because for them, the sky is the limit. These creatures can use their wings to fly anywhere in the world they want true freedom. However, he admits he got scolded when he told Teresia that, since he had chosen their son's name based on a monster. Sometime later, the two reach the boar that had been taken down, a gigantic creature that makes the baby open his mouth in awe. Getting closer, he admits it must be terrifying to face something that size. One of the hunting companions, Gerda, announces Rodden as the one mainly responsible for killing the boar, which earns him a big tribute from the other men. Gerda notices his friend brought his son, so Alan introduces himself with a level of politeness that is literally frightening. Since Gerda has a 1-year-old daughter, Krina, who is nowhere near having that kind of vocabulary, Alan asks if that big beast is strong, and the man says it takes 20 hunters to bring down a C-rank creature like that. 10 months later, Alan was able to conjure rank G creature cards, as well as fuse summons, and the space for cards in his inventory had doubled, which means twice the amount of buffs he could receive. Since fusion required a lot of mana points, he ate and took good care of himself to accumulate the amount needed to use the technique. When everything was ready, he tried mixing 2 rat cards, but despite his excitement, he realized he still didn't have enough MP. Frustrated, he decided to just create another rank G conjuration card, but he couldn't do that either with his current mana limit. Upon turning 3, the boy could create creature cards such as frogs and moles. Mixing the two, he created a card of a rank G bird, granting a +2 buff to agility and intelligence. From that, he named the bird Chappie, which had the skill vocal mimicry, basically Chappie perfectly imitating Alan's voice. Then he conjured the frog, which he began to call Hopper, bearer of the skill Taunt, useful for distracting enemies. The mole, of course, had the skill Dig, very useful for hideouts and traps. As he developed and studied more about his class, Alan discovered that the secret was to know every status deeply so he could create a powerful combination of buffs for each situation. In his opinion, this was a complex and challenging game, exactly what he had been looking for a long time. On the other hand, it's worth noting that Alan is far from summoning creatures strong enough to stand against the possible dragons and boars the world has. In any case, now that it is 3 in the afternoon, the boy hears the voice of a girl challenging him to a knight's duel, one of the activities he doesn't seem to like very much. Even so, Alan presents himself for a duel against Krina, the fierce, at least that's what she called herself. In turn, his rival self proclaimed herself Alan the Honored, and although he pretended to be motivated for the fight, he grumbled internally about having to take this seriously every time. Anyway, serious or not, when the fight begins, Alan takes a series of blows from a wooden sword at an incredible speed. Even though he put all his buffs into agility, the boy admits he can barely block the swords. In the end, Krina breaks Alan's sword in half and secures the victory. At the end of the afternoon, she goes to the boy's house to announce her achievement. Smiling and pregnant with another baby, Teresia asks the girl to head home before it gets dark, and that's what she does. Lying there shattered like it was nothing, Alan suffers the pain of defeat on the ground. Still, at dinner time, the boy volunteers of his own free will to help with the potato harvest, knowing that his mother is heavily pregnant and can't work normally. Internally, Alan knows that at this point he has the vitality of an adult man, even though he's only 3 years old in practice. Teresia and Rodden say that children should never have to work, and that the boy should keep playing with Krina, especially because he already helps inside the house. The child insists, but his parents advise him to enjoy himself as much as he can, because the time will come when he will have to work on the farm, whether he wants to or not. Hearing this, Alan concludes that he and his parents will always be servants until they die, practicing this exhausting labor every day without being able to change their fate. Changing the subject, Teresia and her husband say they saw their son throwing stones at a tree earlier and want to know why. Alan says that his parents themselves warned him about the existence of monsters outside the house, so he has been training to protect his mother with stones. That said, while his father hugged him proudly, the truth was that Alan was only trying to see if he could learn techniques that went beyond conjuration. Teresia asks if her son is also going to protect Krina, but when he remembers how their last duel went, the boy figures she can already handle herself. Rodden comments that he can't wait for the two of them to attend their evaluation ceremony, and when Alan asks what that is, his mother explains that when he turns 5, he will take part in a divine ceremony that determines what talent he possesses. Rodden hopes it will be a talent good enough to pull his son away from a servant's life, and that hope lifts everyone's spirits in the house that night. Some time later, it begins to snow in the village. After continuing his training, Alan is now able to maintain a summoned creature for an entire day without any problems. On the other hand, in his duels against Krina, since she also comes from a conjurer background, the boy struggles a lot to withstand the girl's overwhelming pace. She keeps dominating every match and knocking the kid flat. One day, after Alan loses yet again, Teresia ends up falling to the ground when she gets startled by Denka, which causes her water to break, and now she's about to give birth again. She is quickly taken to a bed in a warm place so everything can go well. But because he's doing everything by himself, Rodden starts worrying that things won't go as smoothly as he hoped. Since Alan is the only one there to help, Krina runs off to call her parents, so Gerda shows up with Matilda, his wife, to help the poor man. Hours pass as Matilda handles the situation and makes sure the delivery happens without complications. It's such a difficult and drawn-out labor that it lasts until the next day, until finally a baby's cry reaches the ears of the men sleeping outside. When the father goes into the room and learns it's another boy, Teresia asks him to choose the name. So Rodden names their second son Mesh. Teresia really likes it, but hopes he didn't take the name from some monster. The poor guy tries to explain himself in every possible way, but Teresia starts laughing. When everyone begins laughing together, Alan can't help thinking about something he has thought ever since he reincarnated into this world. He isn't even a little bit sad about leaving his entire past behind, because the difference between his old life and this one is enormous. It's true, of course, that he'll give everything he has to progress in the game to obtain the best equipment and spells, but when his parents call him over to meet his brother, Alan feels that there is much more to this life than glory and achievements. From that moment on, he decides that his greatest goal is to free his family from servitude. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.